What's the main thing parents need to know?
Well, that's really interesting. You should ask me the main thing because there's about 7 key points that I love to point out. But I'm going to now point out the key point of all those points. Parents have to be actively engaged with their children's activities, meaning they have to understand and go into their children's environments. Children's worlds are increasingly becoming more virtual and they're becoming much more inclusive. And if you're not part of the inclusive group that goes in and actually enjoys themselves in that particular area, how will you be able to talk about it? You can't. So, one thing that I stress with parents is it was very helpful if instead of you complaining about, for example, a child on social media too long and you want them not to be on social media, why don't you go into their social media feeds, actually see what they're doing, participate with them a little bit, get to know what really makes them happy? Because when you know what is making your kids not follow your rules, and when you know what is exciting your kids, then you can have productive conversations and you don't sound like a nagging parent because you're informed. And too often, especially since I've been writing the book for 3 years, I've had this question over and over again. Well, how do I stop my kid being on TikTok? How do I do this? How do I do that? Have you ever been on TikTok? No. Do you know what they're up against? No. Well, would it be helpful if you started a dialogue with them? So I've had some of these parents come back to me about a year later, and I'm thinking of this one particular case, and they did start having dialogues with their children, and it did change their activities. It didn't get the children off the apps, but it allowed them and the parents to have a constructive dialogue. And then there was more adherence to the rules. So, as I'm asking us adults to have dialogue, I really want families to have dialogue internally and really be honest about everyone's addiction to social media. That's another thing, parents. You have to be really honest. You're as addicted as your kids. I mean, if we don't admit our addiction, are we not just being a little bit hypocritical? Kids, off the device. I'm on mine. Off the device. No, you can't do that. You have to have some willpower also. Think of it this way. If you've embarked on having children, you have a 20-year filter. And then in that 20-year filter, everything you do is going to be judged by them, by your kids. And if you want them to actually do and mimic you, then I recommend that you learn how to actually have your own limits on social media. So, Kim, there's your first big topic, the one that no one wants to talk about, the big one.
Oof, it's so important. And I know not a lot of people are willing to have these kinds of really honest dialogues. It's one of the things I appreciate most about you. But absolutely, if we as adults are not leading by example, the kids are simply following our example. So, yes, they're being inundated with all these engaging things online. And also, society is inundating them with all types of indoctrination. And we as adults are also quite addicted to these entertaining, engaging devices. Now, yes, there's a lot of positive things you and I both know about technology, not only for adults, but for kids. But to your point, what kind of example are we setting, and how can we expect our children to do something differently than us? Oof, it's such a good point. We have a question in the comments. I'm not sure, are you familiar with Roblox? Roblox is a children's game. We get a lot of questions about it, and someone in the comments, I can't say the full word, but do you think Roblox has been infiltrated with predators? Is it a predatory app, in your opinion, for children?
Unfortunately, every children's software program app that has chat in it seems to have been at some point infiltrated by some bad actor. It is sick. Um, I I don't want to specifically claim against, the one software house that they haven't done a good job because I've watched and I've been on media enough, but the technology media looking at these issues, and I know they're all fighting them. The problem with a lot of these outfits is that they do not have the manpower and the ability to actually do enough governance inside the chat rooms that they set up for the kids to actually play together. And when they're playing together, this means you create a game, the chat room's created in the game. So you're actually providing an interactive game. You start chatting with children, and there's a predator that's playing the game with the children that's got in because completely lied about how old they are, and etc. And then they start being a predator inside the game. That's a little hard because it's very hard for the game manufacturers, the person's following all the rules until they're not, to know. So the technologies that are needed, but then you see, this is the problem. The technology that we need is incredibly snoopy. You need a technology that's going to be watching the game world at all times and polices it. And as soon as bad things occur, things can occur. But then you have one more issue. Kids have a tremendous ability to mimic us. So therefore, their profanity and things they say in these chat rooms, and they could be completely innocent, sometimes are completely innocent, not innocent in what they're saying, but they're not the predators. They're just kids playing around. So are you going to ban them all for bad behavior? And then the game will then lose its credibility with the gaming audience because the kids can't have fun in the game. So from my perspective, this is again why you, as the parent, or i.e., talking to parents or advising people, needs to really recommend that parent needs to go into the game world, check out the actual chat room your child's in, because some chat rooms are great, and some of these games have the best team play, and it teaches your child how to be involved with other people and how to win a game and how to be with a team and a group, etc., etc. But there are other chat rooms where your kids are being exposed to horrible things. And I'm going to tell you this, it's not up to the game any longer. It's up to us, the parents, being a little bit more old fashioned and a little bit more snoopy and going into those chat rooms. So I hope I'm trying to give you guys a fair answer because it's a very difficult problem.
Yep, absolutely. Very balanced answer, which I always appreciate. And just to highlight everything you said, we have to realize what's behind the majority of this entertainment. It's not necessarily even set up nefariously by the app designers, creators, companies. It's that predators are strategic and they will find a way to infiltrate spaces that attract children. Now, the modern day version of a creep at a playground might be a creep on the internet stalking children on these apps. So to Mark's point, yes, there are certain apps that if I were a parent, and I'm not, I would not want my child to have a smartphone. I would definitely not allow my child to use any of the apps listed on our red flag apps list. However, it's up to the parent to enforce those boundaries and guidelines. So we can't necessarily blame the technology or Satan and society if we're not doing our part to enforce the rules and guidelines to protect our kids.
Guys, this is where it gets so tricky. There's a side to us that we become almost hyperactive parents, and we do not want to leave anything to chance. But yet, we give these powerful supercomputers, if you want to rate them at the scale of a 1980 supercomputer, to our kids, then say, go at it. And by the way, I feel better as a parent because you're safe now. You're not safe because ultimately, and this is, of course, number two on my list. How much is the loss of innocence worth? You want that to really sink in. You give the phone for security, but your kids lose their innocence. How much did that phone really cost if a kid loses their innocence? That's why we have to be engaged. That's why
Absolutely.
we have to go in deep.
Very valid point. I think we also need to update our way of thinking because, yes, the old ways, the old days, we can pretend like those still apply, but technology didn't exist when they wrote the Constitution. In the same way that
Nope.
we have age limits and minimums on cigarettes and alcohols and other things that are harmful for children, technology is a whole other game. So I don't think anyone listening wants more government involvement in anything. When it comes to the playground of technology, it's not an even playing field. We want to talk about predation. Kids don't stand a chance, not only in general from predatory adults, but from these aggressive algorithms. And I know you talk a lot in your book, Mark, about the army of programmers, the people that are spending millions of dollars finding ways to keep us glued to those devices.
So this is a story from the book. It involves my son and myself. In fact, my son has allowed me to print the story as long as I gave him a good ending, which he now has. And I'm pleased to tell you that his struggle became also a struggle for the whole family. And yet it was dad that self-inflicted the struggle upon my child. So if I really want to be honest about this, is I made an assumption that Mark and my son could actually have enough willpower to control our social media, and we could control what my son sees because he would turn it off when he was told to. There's only one little problem with that. When you have, for example, just at Meta or Facebook, 1,000 programmers dedicated, actually it was 2,000 programmers dedicated to cleaning up search, just dedicated to cleaning up search. I'm not even talking about how many people are working in algorithms. So when you have basically thousands of people working on one task, which was make eyeballs stick to the platform, make sure people don't leave the platform, make sure you keep swiping the videos. And you have thousands of people that are spending all of their life force to keep your eyeballs glued. They win. There is no way I have the tools and the willpower to completely negate the power of what they're trying to do because they've had psychiatrists, they've had doctors, they've had science, they've had statistics, they've had marketing research. They have done so much to figure out how to addict us. And none of us, in my opinion, there is no one on planet Earth that can really tell me that there isn't a way for these algorithms to addict them because these algorithms have a nasty habit of making the things you like most, your bias, the things you like most, be the things they show you. So they keep showing you your personal candy, the things you most are weakest for. I hope
Mm.
that scares everyone because that is why you're losing. You're not losing because you don't have willpower, and your kid's not losing because it's not their fault. And it's not your fault until you don't take action. Then it's completely your fault. I mean,
Oh,
I have to be a little bit devilish here
it's a
because
very good way to
it's
put
not
it.
your fault. Yeah, until you don't take the action because you now know. And if you've listened to me, you must, even if you want to, because we tend to do this, especially when you're cornered in a wall and you realize someone's saying some truth that you don't want to accept. The first thing people try to do is punch back and they will go, no, 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 you got this wrong. Well, guess what? If I do have it wrong, and if everything I'm saying tonight is wrong, then join the dialogue, join us, and let us all work on a better compromise. But until you join the dialogue with me, you're just complaining. And unfortunately, I'm not going to take your side seriously. But anyone who wants to join this fight, who actually wants to work with us to figure out what is best for our children, I'm all in because I don't think I am the only person who can do common sense things. I think we all can do common sense things, but there's not enough of us who are willing to make it happen. It's all of us. So I don't want to be someone that you like as much as I want someone that you all agree you got to listen to them. And one thing I learned from my wife, and one of the toughest lessons of my life was it's up to that person how they think about you, not about what you want them to think about you. It's none of my business. So I'm not here to win a popularity contest. What I'm trying to do is really sound the alarm, tell you the 3 years of my life writing the book was really to pay back for the incredible career I've had in this country and for the amazing things I get to do in my life because of this country. So I wrote the book to help everyone. And what I'm excited about is in the book, I give action steps that allows everyone to get involved. And I give you the steps to actually start helping your children. And guess what? You don't have to go out and buy anything. There are no programs that you have to do. There's nothing special here. This is just a common sense guide to how we should try to conduct our life. Think of it as an outline. Then you fill in the blanks. You do it your way. But until we all get involved and directly start intervening in our kids' lives by getting onto their apps, looking at what they're doing, and understanding what's happening in our lives, and accepting the addiction is real on all counts, and then getting together as a family unit and discussing it, being open to it, we're not going to make any progress. And whilst that's happening legally, we have the federal government who had a very contentious Silicon Valley meeting this week, where basically, I mean, we have congressmen now and senators saying, you know, guys, you in Silicon Valley have created a lot of harm and done a lot of destruction, and you don't even take credit and you don't take responsibility, and you have an amazing ability to not ever have to be responsible for what you do. And that's true. That is
Yeah.
absolutely true, because these companies have got utility status, and they can't be sued specifically. But the truth is, so at that point, when they also decided that they have biases and they want their biases to be adhered to, and anyone who doesn't collectively adhere to their bias shouldn't be allowed to, well, then, in my opinion, they became a publisher and they no longer a utility, and therefore they should be under the purview of legislation, because you can't publish and edit and then say you're impartial. If you're editing by taking content down from your platform because you don't like it, then that's editing. And that means you have an opinion and you have an editorial opinion. And therefore, in my opinion, your bias means that you should be forced as a publisher to publish everyone, and you should bring equity and inclusion, these new words of this decade, into that. And it's funny because those are the same people talking about all those terms, but completely not applying them to their own algorithms. All I'm asking Silicon Valley, all of you, I don't care what your politics are in your nighttime affair. In your day job, keep your politics to yourself. Allow us to see the news and draw our own conclusions. Allow us to know what's editorial and what is a bias. Allow us to actually have real news so we can be the judge and not have you be our nanny state to tell us how we should conduct our life. And that is the shame of it. That's really the bottom line. This is the other issue. We've stopped checking things out. The other week, YouTube was woke up to a headline from one of the magazines claiming that YouTube is making your computer sweat. And this went viral. Tons of YouTube videos came out of nowhere proclaiming that YouTube is intentionally hurting your computer if you're trying to block ads, and they're making your computer work harder, and it's environmentally unfriendly, and how could YouTube be so mean? Well, a few days later, a correction comes from YouTube explaining that it turns out it was the actual ad blockers that were creating the problem, and YouTube had nothing to do with it. But the problem is, in our modern culture, with all these algorithms, by this point, people had already taken their swords out and were slashing. And this is the insane part of my story. Now go to YouTube and you can try this out. How many people withdrew their criticism of YouTube after the facts came out? How many people corrected their stories on YouTube? How much false information was allowed to just lay there forever? There's your problem.
Yeah, I think people are, in general, there's a lot of information to be overwhelmed by these days, and there's not a lot of people willing to do their part to really research and get factual information. But to your point, drama is very popular. We know how clickbait works, where you get people to be mad or shake their fist and get emotional about something for the sake of engagement. Whether or not it's completely factual, whether or not their emotions are beneficial to the subject, whether or not they actually do anything to impact it, you get them to be emotionally involved, and they think that they're being upset about terrible things around the world or things that bad people are doing. People sort of get distracted or stop there sometimes, and that's unfortunate. And to your point, there's a lot of things we need to be aware about, but what's most important is also the willingness to take action and to lead by example, especially when it comes to protecting children. So we talked about a couple tips, and for those just joining us here, I'll repost. Tip number one was to be actively involved in your kids' world. I love how Mark says to really get into your kids' world, see what they're doing, see what their feed consists of, see who they're messaging, who they're talking to online. And the second one is to be honest about your tech addictions and to lead by example. So, what are some more practical solutions that you would recommend for parents? I know your book is full of them, and I highly recommend that people pre-order the book because there's a lot of, it's a manual of how to protect yourself digitally. But you talked about how
So,
your son was able to circumvent your protections as a technologist.
yes.
Where should parents start, and what actually works?
Yes, and by the way, I mean, first of all, I just want parents to realize parenting obviously um, is not an art form because every child is different, and therefore, as you master one, you get a new life form that is completely different, and you have to figure out new rules of engagement. But this is really the bottom line for our kids and our parents right now. I would love to see parents start having content discussions and start talking to their kids about the apps and the videos and the streaming that they actually do, from their music all the way through to their social. And when they're looking at their social media and their apps, I want them to also go and look at their Netflix accounts, and all streaming accounts usually will monitor if you have broken your household by profiles, which ours is. So each kid has their profile they go into. You can then see what they're watching. I wonder how many people tonight have actually gone into Netflix or whatever streaming service they have and looked at what they're watching, or have actually even looked at what their kids are searching in YouTube. And if you're not aware, on most of the streaming platforms, you can go to the history, and you go into that history and you can really see it. Now, let's pretend you see something that really alarms you. You don't go and bust the child just that you see that, because I guarantee you the child was to look at your feeds, how innocent anyone thinks they are. There will be something on there that will learn them about you. So then, if you're really, really courageous, you then have a dialogue with your child that will change the way your child and you have a relationship with technology. You become their accountability partner, and you allow them to see your feeds. You allow them to monitor you. Yes, now
I
you're
love
in
that.
an amazing relationship, and they have power over you. You have power over them. And now you've made an oath, a commitment. I really love that. I think that is a technique to really help parents. So I've given you a really good idea that we've seen work, and I know personally it works. And I apply this technique often in many things that I do. It's the idea that you get involved and you share. You share your hurt. You share your fragility in exchange for the other person's fragility. And then you bond together to become more powerful.
That's so good. I love that.
If you engage with the children and you create a relationship where you're talking about the content um, as equals, you will then learn what is motivating them to look at bad content. And if you start to see self esteem issues or other issues with your children or with what they're choosing, you then at least now have an option to actually intervene. And intervention, most of the time, is having dialogues, educating.